Welcome to the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue 2020. And thank you for joining today's panel discussion, the first in a series of 6 hosted by the producers of the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue. My name is Geraldine de Bastion, and I have the honor of moderating this series of debates on current energy-related topics. Due to the falling costs in renewable energy generation and the ever-increasing need to reduce emissions and effectively achieve the decarbonisation of all sectors, hydrogen produced by renewable energies is increasingly seen as one of the, if not the sector-enabling technology and energy carrier required to reach carbon neutrality. Today, we will be discussing the future of green hydrogen as a game changer to decarbonise industry and the current developments of international partnerships. I'm honored to be joined by 3 panelists for this discussion that I would like to introduce to you now. Firstly, I would like to introduce Mr. Mohamed Ouhmed as the Director for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency for the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Environment of Morocco. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Si vous permettez, moi je vais intervenir en français. Si vous le permettez. Et je voudrais tout d'abord remercier la République fédérale d'Allemagne de nous avoir invités à ce dialogue important sur la transition énergétique et qui constitue aujourd'hui une plateforme appropriée pour discuter des différentes thématiques et des nouveautés concernant la transition énergétique. Et c'est avec un réel plaisir que je participe à ce panel qui porte sur une thématique importante et d'actualité qui est l'hydrogène renouvelable comme catalyseur de la transition énergétique. Je remercie Madame pour cette question qui m'offre justement l'opportunité de présenter le contexte marocain en relation avec la transition énergétique et le développement de l'hydrogène vert. En fait, le Maroc, il a entamé depuis une dizaine d'années le déploiement d'un grand programme d'énergie renouvelable. Et il a affiché des objectifs ambitieux de manière volontariste quant aux capacités à installer pour dépasser 52% à l'horizon 2030. Ceci s'est déjà concrétisé par un certain nombre de réalisations sur le terrain, notamment en termes de capacité, et 3700 MW d'énergie renouvelable sont aujourd'hui installés et opérationnels, qui représentent 34% de notre capacité totale. En outre, cette montée en puissance d'énergie renouvelable, elle sera renforcée davantage dans les années à venir, du fait que la totalité de la capacité installée est de sources renouvelables. Les résultats aujourd'hui confirment que le Maroc, comme l'Allemagne d'ailleurs, est bien engagé dans une transition énergétique. Et je saisis cette occasion pour remercier la République fédérale d'Allemagne pour son soutien et son accompagnement tout au long de ce processus. Et plus récemment, on assiste, comme vous l'avez précisé, Madame, à une dynamique internationale qui a pour objectif de créer une filière économique et industrielle autour de molécules vertes, afin de réduire les émissions du tissu économique mondial en termes d'émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Et le Maroc s'est inscrit de manière volontariste dans cette dynamique de développement de l'hydrogène vert qui pourrait être produit, bien évidemment, en utilisant ces ressources renouvelables pour lesquelles il dispose d'un gisement considérable, et particulièrement le solaire et l'éolien, pour lesquels le prix du kilowattheure sont aujourd'hui très encourageants. Il a saisi cette opportunité pour investiguer le potentiel ENR du pays et a développé une filière de l'hydrogène vert, qui constitue également un moyen pour l'accélération de l'atteinte de nos objectifs en termes de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre d'ici 2030. Notre volontarisme s'est traduit tout d'abord par la réalisation d'une étude portant sur les opportunités du power to hydrogène au Maroc, réalisée par l'Institut allemand Fraunhofer avec l'appui de la GIZ Parima, dans le but de mettre en place une feuille de route claire avec des programmes clairs de production de l'hydrogène vert. Cette étude a conclu que le Maroc peut devenir un acteur clé dans le développement de la filière hydrogène en raison notamment de sa situation géographique optimale de ces interconnexions énergétiques, notamment avec l'Europe déjà opérationnelle, et c'est le prévu, de ces ressources exceptionnelles en énergie renouvelable, ces infrastructures et logistiques, et d'un tissu industriel en mesure de contribuer au développement de ces technologies. Une commission nationale d'hydrogène, regroupant l'ensemble des acteurs, a été mise en place et elle a bénéficié d'un voyage d'études pour s'enquérir de l'expérience allemande sur le terrain en matière d'hydrogène. Et il a été organisé en 2019 avec l'appui du Parima, que je tiens encore une fois à remercier. S'agissant de l'intérêt de l'hydrogène pour le Maroc, comme vous l'avez très bien mentionné sur le thème de ce panel, le Maroc considère que l'hydrogène vert est un maillon qui permettrait non seulement une décarbonisation efficace et durable de notre économie, mais aussi pour ancrer davantage la transition énergétique vers des sources propres. À ce propos, l'hydrogène permettra au Maroc à moyen terme de décarboniser son secteur industriel, en particulier l'industrie des fertilisants phosphatés, en évitant à terme l'importation d'environ 2 millions de tonnes d'ammoniac. L'utilisation de l'hydrogène vert pourrait aussi profiter à nos industries traditionnelles agroalimentaires, du ciment, de la métallurgie, mais également les nouvelles filières en cours de développement dans le cadre de notre plan d'accélération industrielle. En outre, à moyen et long terme, l'hydrogène vert permettra de décarboner notre secteur de transport, notamment par la production de carburants verts. Ainsi, une opportunité d'export vers des pays comme l'Allemagne de molécules vertes compétitives et à haute valeur ajoutée permettrait de créer au Maroc un écosystème industriel créateur de valeur et d'emplois directs par dizaines de milliers pour notre jeunesse. Et pour ne pas dépasser le timing qui m'a été réservé, je réitère au terme de cette allocution introductive mes remerciements, mes vifs remerciements à la partie allemande qui nous a soutenus tout au long de la transition énergétique et sur lesquels on a déjà mis en place les bases pour renforcer davantage notre coopération, notamment pour la filière hydrogène vert. Et merci.
Thank you so much, sir, for your introductory remarks and getting a glimpse into that very powerful vision that you are pursuing. Before we begin with the debate, I would like to introduce our other two panelists now, starting with Manuel Kuhn, who is head of new energy for Middle East and Africa at Siemens and responsible there for the topic of green hydrogen and decarbonisation, as well as for the strategy and business development of the Middle East and Siemens roadmap for the re-electrification of Iraq. Welcome, Mr. Kuhn.
Thank you.
And a third discussion participant today, I would like to introduce to you George Chatzimarkakis. He is the Secretary General of Hydrogen Europe, has been in that position since 2016. And Hydrogen Europe is the European Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, currently representing more than 160 industry companies, 83 research organizations, and 21 national associations. Welcome to the both of you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So I would like to kick off the discussion by just having you dive a little bit into the current status quo, because as I understand at present, the concept is there and the vision is very much there, as Mr. Ouhmed just expressed quite clearly, a powerful vision, but the product itself is not yet viable. So the aim is really to create a market for green hydrogen in different industry sectors. Where do you currently see the biggest hurdles in building a green hydrogen economy? That's what I want to start off with, as well as where you see the promises of this going. So, Mr. Chatzimarkakis, what do you think are the current core barriers for the transition of the industrial processes as the way they're being powered now to using hydrogen instead?
Well, so far, the biggest problems were basically in our head. Because people thought hydrogen is so far away, is so science fiction that it doesn't make sense. I'm very honest to you, we also had over the years a very promising future with regards to renewable electrons and desert tech, which is very much connected also to Morocco, was one big vision, also based on electrons, that was not successful because you cannot transport electrons over a long distance. You lose a big part of it. And that is why we had a fixed idea when it came to electricity only. And fortunately, this big hurdle could be overcome the last, I would say the last 2 years especially, where the Paris Agreement, the goals, the targets that we put on ourselves on one hand were, so to say, mirrored by the possibilities that we have with our infrastructure and the difficulties to store and to transport these electrons. And then hydrogen basically jumped in. Hydrogen is a molecule, and hydrogen can do both long-term big volume storage on one hand, and it can be cheaply transported. And so basically we could do now desert tech. We could use the renewable energy resources that Morocco, for instance, has, and use the existing pipelines later on, or use other transport possibilities to transport that energy to Europe. Also to use hydrogen as as Mohamed just said, to use it in industry. In this case, it's the fertilizer industry, and to create real value there and use hydrogen as a green or as a renewable feedstock. So I think, in my eyes, the biggest hurdle was mindset. And I think we did overcome it in most of the member states, and Germany just did it as well.
Mr. Kuhn, I'm curious to see if you agree or if you have any other perspectives to add. And if we've really been able to crack the mindset, then where do we get going? Where's a good starting point with industries, looking at different industries across sectors in terms of building a market for green hydrogen?
Now, let me connect to the barriers in our head, because I believe we are still working on the understanding that we have to manage a transition here. And the effects that we will see, not only to the hydrogen technology, and I believe we have a fairly clear picture how decarbonization of our energy systems and industry is going to work. It wasn't that clear 3 years ago, I completely agree, but right now I think the picture is pretty straightforward. For me, the very interesting question is, how do we get there, and what decisions we have to take on the way? And let me give you an example. To a lot of the customers and the large entities that I'm talking here in the Middle East, we always end up at the question: do we see this now as a strategic initiative or already at a commercial one? And it is easy to discuss it on a strategic level, but the moment I shift into commercial discussions, we end up at the question of, is it competitive today? When is it? And how much investment is reasonable to do? Yeah? At this point in time, or should I rather sit and wait a bit until the cost for electrolyzers go down, for the renewable energy go down? So there are a lot of customers that I'm talking to, and government entities that are right now exactly at this question, like, what is prudent to do today? How much should I expose myself in order also not to jumpstart where it's not needed, and also then creating actually adverse examples for how it does not work. So we are in the middle of the discussion how we do it, not anymore what. It's so much more about the how.
Okay, so summarizing, it's not a question of if, and it's not a question of technical barriers necessarily. It's more of a question of efficiency and when people are actually ready to make that change, that jump. Okay, so Mr. Chatzimarkis, just getting back to you, I'd like to have a little insight maybe also into your daily work. How are you trying to get people to make that jump? Like, what are the impulses needed to get people to start transiting, and what role do industry alliances such as the one that you represent play?
Yes, I would like to present to you this here. This is the 2x40 gigawatt initiative. It's made by Hydrogen Europe, by us, and 40 gigawatt initiative until 2030 within Europe. And the other 40, and you can see it here, so it's DII, so it's Desert Tech, it's the African Hydrogen Partnership, it's also Ukraine, so it's outside Europe. What did we do? We presented this in January this year, and we are extremely pleased that the European Commission took it up and enshrined it into the hydrogen strategy that has been adopted last week, or has been communicated, has been proposed by the European Commission last week. So the 2x40 are in. And what does it say? It says that we need in the next 10 years to ramp up our electrolyzer capacity in order to produce renewable hydrogen by 80 gigawatt. And pretty much 30 of it will be in Northern Africa. Sun-rich, and Morocco is also wind-rich belt, where this is feasible. To put it into another figure, we want immediately, within the next 4 years, to produce 1 million ton of green hydrogen in both parts, Europe and Northern Africa, and 10 million tons in 2030. That's very ambitious. And this is an initiative to overcome the chicken and egg problem, because this is what we have normally. You have, on one hand, the people who say, okay, we can produce the hydrogen. And what we did, we topped this up by a blueprint 2030. So a blueprint of green hydrogen 2030, where we also echoed how this would then translate into demand, with clean hydrogen corridors from Sicily to Sweden, with clear aspects on where residential fuel cells can be used. But we start with the industry. So even also Mohamed alluded to the industry. This will be the low-hanging fruit, the first customer for renewable hydrogen, where hydrogen is then used as a renewable, so to say, feedstock. It's the petrochemical industry, so refineries, it's the fertilizer industry, and it's also the steel industry. And this is the starting point. The clusters, the industrial clusters, can be then connected via backbones that later on will serve as a bigger backbone. And this is how we create it and build it up. Last sentence, I say it again, I'm super happy that the European Commission picked this up. And you see here, the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, that will be the instrument that also has been launched last week to implement these plans. We are now forced by the hydrogen strategy of the European Commission to create a pipeline of projects until the end of this year in order to get to the 1 million in 24. So you see, we have quite some stress that we imposed on ourselves, but we thought this is the best way to overcome this situation that you are alluding to, how to start. And so this plan seems to have been found some fans in the political decision-making field, and now it's on us, also the industry, together with the policymakers, to implement it.
Thank you very much. I would like to pass it back to Mr. Ouhmed to maybe give us a little bit more insights into how you were able to get to the point where you are now in Morocco, because it seems that everybody is very committed in terms of stakeholders, and you have been able to bring industrial players on board. As you mentioned, the fertilizer industry has been mentioned several times now. So I would like to ask what the process was like to get everybody to align with this vision, and if there are any other stakeholders missing that you think you need to bring on board.
Donc, merci pour cette question pertinente, parce que ça m'est permis de réitérer encore une fois pour réaffirmer que le développement d'une économie verte pour le Maroc, c'est un choix stratégique. C'est un choix stratégique et toutes les parties prenantes, justement, s'alignent pour l'atteinte de cet objectif, aussi bien pour l'hydrogène que pour d'autres secteurs d'activité économique. Et l'engagement de toutes les parties prenantes, notamment les administrations publiques, les opérateurs industriels, les institutions du secteur de l'énergie comme Mazen, comme les Rizen, ont réaffirmé cet engagement au niveau de la commission technique nationale qui a été mise en place dans le cadre de sa démarche participative et de concertation qui a été mise en place et dédiée essentiellement à l'hydrogène vert. Donc, je cite en particulier Mazen qui a concrétisé déjà cet engagement par la volonté de réaliser, bien sûr, avec l'appui de nos partenaires allemands, d'un projet sur l'hydrogène qui a une dimension industrielle, mais aussi celle de l'Erizen qui a déjà bénéficié du soutien de la partie allemande pour réaliser un certain nombre d'études, mais aussi pour mettre en place une plateforme de recherche, de développement, de l'innovation qui est dédiée essentiellement à l'hydrogène. À cela s'ajoute l'intérêt qui se manifeste aujourd'hui de plus en plus de la part de nos industriels qui veulent produire des produits plus propres, et je cite en particulier l'OCP qui a déjà engagé des actions concrètes sur des projets pour produire de l'ammoniac vert et son utilisation pour les fertilisants.
Thank you. So research and development was just mentioned as a keyword, and obviously there have been huge R&D investments needed to get to where we are today, and will probably be needed in future as well. And technology companies are expected to use their expertise to further such innovative technologies and support, and then of course to also make them cost effective and scale. So Mr. Kuhn, I'd be interested in asking you, the strategy that's been mentioned already, the German National Hydrogen Strategy, also includes a set of measures to support research and development. And I'm wondering if you think from a Siemens perspective that's sufficient, and also perhaps a little bit where you see the role of the private or the public sector in taking this next step, you know, like the sort of like lobby work that you need to do to convince people to jump on board, and now is the time is right. Would you wish for some other form of public support, or do you think we're in a really good state, especially in Germany, given the strategic priority this topic has gotten?
Yeah, so in terms of supporting the R&D, I mean, the first thing that we need to address is the aspect of scale. Most of the OEMs, also others than us, we have reached roughly 75% of electrolyzer efficiency. That's quite okay, yeah? And that can be improved, and we are all working on the membranes and so on. That's clear. For me, it's more important to think about how we get actually the cost all around it down. So there are a lot of aspects that I believe have a higher impact. So, for example, how do I something that we completely forgot with PV and wind, how do I recycle my membranes, for example, and after which time? So how many operating hours can I really guarantee? How do I recycle? How do I recover the precious metals out of this? Because if I do that, I actually have a big revenue stream backwards after 10, 8, 15 years, depending on the operating hours. So there is lots of business modeling around the question how electrolyzers will be deployed. So I'm talking now the electrolyzer. So let's go a bit to the forward in the value chain. The whole question how I couple renewable electricity that comes intermittent, whether it comes through the grid or direct into my electrolyzers. There are a couple of steps in. Yeah, I mean we convert DC to AC and back to DC. There are lots of things that are actually not required. Why? Because we take pieces of technology that were not originally developed for this value chain and plug them together. Now it's time to look at it end to end and start taking out the unnecessary pieces. And there will be a lot of unnecessary pieces. And if I look downstream, even into the direction of e-fuel synthesis, the simulation of this whole value chains, I believe there is a massive leap in efficiency, in capex, and also in opex that we can achieve. But this is all not done yet. Yeah, and now the question is, on which platform do I do that? For example, Mr. Ouhmed just mentioned the research platform that is planned for Morocco, yeah, where there is a full chain then model. Yeah, you rather want to do this on a small research platform scale, because if I today scale up into the hundreds of megawatt classes, I scale up my cost disadvantages too. And how do I explain investors that I want to run this asset for 15, 20 years? Based on what I know today. So that's a bit of a chicken egg where we are today. So there is lots of questions on how to optimize the full value chains. And at the same time, the pressure to scale up is very high from now policymakers, from us as well, because we say if we don't scale up production, if we don't have the demand, we will never get the cost down. So everybody is pushing for scaling up, but a lot of homework in the details is also not really done yet. And it will be a very interesting process how we sync this in the next couple of years.
And maybe just as a quick addition, do you have a concrete address where you think this is what we need to get that homework done?
Now, coming back to the for example, to the German policies, I was honestly a bit disappointed how slow we were in the beginning with the Reallabore. Yeah, so this started very fast and then somehow lost a bit momentum. I believe now with the German hydrogen strategy and also what comes from the European side, I hope that this will now gain more momentum. And it's really about how fast all the regulation that or let's say the strategies, find their ways into regulation. Because the regulatory aspects, that is what will define critical parameters in the commercial assessments of this project. And everything that is beyond research platforms will have to be going through a commercial assessment. People will have to put in serious investment money into this. And I have questions that nobody today can answer. And as long as we don't really answer these questions, we will always have to try to find workarounds. And these workarounds are going to be expensive. Now, we could say we can afford a couple of these expensive workarounds, but to really scale up and get this exponential growth that we're looking for, we have to allow the market to solve these problems for us. And that needs security, especially on the legislative side. I give you one example that I think about a lot because I didn't find a solution yet. And if we think beyond hydrogen into liquids, for many applications, airlines, deep sea shipping, if we go into a methanol route, for example, I need a CO2 source. And I'm still struggling to explain how exactly I supply CO2 to my synthesis plant. There are different aspects as well, but just stick to the CO2. What is an acceptable CO2 source? Is a dual use of CO2 acceptable? If it is, for how long? And these are factors. If you do a serious business model of a 200 megawatt methanol plant, the question what the ton of CO2 costs you, it has a big impact on your sensitivity. So this needs to be answered. And I don't see large scale investments going into this industry unless we find good answers to this.
I would, of course, ask if anybody in the round has an answer from Mr. Kuhn that they want to volunteer. Please go ahead.
Yeah, fully agree with the question. I'm not so sure whether there are not other technologies which might come first, like was mentioned by Mohamed, like ammonia. Ammonia needs nitrogen. Nitrogen is abundantly available in the air. So I think ammonia develops more and more to a good alternative to methanol that needs CO2. You are fully right. And I think there will be markets for CO2 later on. But at the moment, on European level, the ammonia narrative is much more important. So it's a derivative of renewable hydrogen. And the Moroccan case is quite promising also in this respect. But I fully agree that we need to overcome the incertitude with legislative action. But whatever we do, we need to start investing, although there is no clear legal basis. There is no regulation. There is a regulation for gas-related issues. So blending is regulated, blending of hydrogen. But when it comes to pure hydrogen backbone, or even to the new derivatives like ammonia, there's no regulation. And that is exactly, I show you again this logo, where the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance has a role to play. Because we agreed when launching this alliance last week, we agreed that we would create here a space of trust where investors, so this is a CEO-led initiative, investors and at the same time policymakers like the European Commission and the member states. So Minister Altmaier was in this launch very actively involved, as well as 3 commissioners, Energy Commissioner, Industry Commissioner, but especially Mr. Timmermans. So what we do is we create a space of trust where a policymaker can clearly say, yes, we will invest into a hydrogen pipeline in order to let you bring, let's stay with the example of Morocco, the renewable hydrogen from Morocco, done with a Siemens electrolyzer, of course, via the pipeline to the mainland, to Europe. And at the same time, we can learn from the experiences of these investments, pipeline of projects, as I said, we can learn for the legislative process that starts to be clear in June next year. So the communications that were presented last week on the energy systems integration, that's sector coupling, and on the hydrogen strategy will lead to a legislative proposal that is expected for June next year, and then it takes 3 years. So 2024 will be the earliest time when this legislative certitude is there. And so I have to, I have to tell you that we need to work like in the Wild West with case law, so case by case, and that's why we need this Hydrogen Alliance, which goes much beyond the German also strategy, but also the German Nationaler Wasserstoffrat, because this is much more industry related and scale up related. So I can help you out with your concerns with that, and legal clarity will be there as of 2024, but that's early enough, because only then the exponential growth will start. And you talked, Mr. Kuhn, about the price, of course. Here we have to see, we have done some calculations that shows that it's cheaper to produce solar hydrogen in Morocco and Portugal and to transport it via pipelines to Hamburg, rather than produce wind hydrogen in the North Sea for Hamburg. So these are the elements we can see right now. Today, there was another nice study that has been shown, so the European Hydrogen Backbone, which has been presented just an hour before. And this says clearly that to transport a kilo of hydrogen in the cheap scenario is 0.009 cent. So it's euro, so it's very, very cheap per kilo per 1,000 kilometers. And there you go. It's for Morocco could become a giant of hydrogen production, also Portugal. And all these elements need just to be taken into a plan. And that's exactly what we are doing there. We are super happy that Siemens is, of course, an active part. So your CEO of Siemens New Energy, Mr. Dr. Bruch, is, of course, actively involved in that alliance. And we are extremely happy about that.
I want to move on to sort of the next focal topic in our discussion, which is the topic around global alliances and partnerships in the sector. So I thought it was quite interesting. Of course, you outlined sort of the need to not just create investments in the sector, but also a return on these investments. So there is this commercial pressure there. At the same time, we're looking to fix global problems, so decarbonization of industry and bringing down our global emissions and really meeting global climate targets in order to protect this planet of ours. So I would like to talk, maybe this is a question for all of you, I would like to talk a little bit about the international scaling of these technologies. Are there initiatives to really collaborate on a global scale and share the innovations that make this possible, share some of the strategies that make this possible, or even policies that make this possible between countries in order for the world to become a little bit greener quickly? Or are we really also looking at a highly competitive environment because of all the commercial pressures?
Of course, maybe I can start. Of course, there are initiatives. So the oldest initiative that exists on a global level is called IPHE, the International Partnership for Hydrogen in the Energy System. It was created by George Bush Sr. During the first hype on hydrogen 2002-2003. So that's an international network of, I think in the meanwhile, it's 19 countries, because last week Morocco joined. So we had a conference 3 weeks ago where your minister, Mohamed, His Excellency Aziz Rabah, was a speaker, and during the conference announced that I had the honor to moderate, he announced that he would become a member. So this is the oldest and very, very important initiative. However, it is rather technical. But it helps to create standards, to have one standard for fueling a car. So my hydrogen car has a 700 bar standard, and I can fuel the car in California or in Seoul and even in China with the same standard. So that is one thing. But on the other hand, we also have to see that there are differences between the geographies, of course. Whereas there is a focus on mobility in the Asian geography, there's a focus on production of hydrogen in Australia. For us in Europe, and I would like to finish with that, we have the intention, and we say this clearly in our hydrogen strategy, to become the global marketplace for clean hydrogen. So to become the focal point where this new commodity, clean hydrogen, will be traded. So we want also hydrogen to be denominated in euro, clearly, and not in dollar or yen. And we want the stock market for hydrogen to be possibly in Rotterdam. I don't know. That might be a place that is very, very well suited. So Europe has not only the intention to use hydrogen for the achievement of the Paris Agreement goals. No, Europe wants to strategically be the master of the global hydrogen market. So I think this is intriguing and exciting, and this includes our neighborhood, so Northern Africa and Ukraine and others. And that is very, very important because we are mastering the whole system. We are talking about climate efficiency and all these interfaces in this system that you need to make the whole system climate efficient need hydrogen. And that's what engineers, I think Mr. Kuhn is an engineer, what engineers like Mr. Kuhn are really, really needed for, and where we Europeans are leading at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any additions, Mr. Ouhmed or Mr. Kuhn? How do you see the global collaborations on this field taking shape?
Yeah, if I may, I think we have not yet even seen the major part of the global cooperation that's about to come, because we cannot overestimate the effect that this new energy system that we are about to create. And I'm very firm. I think we all know how it's going to look like, but how it will create so many disruptions in the current, even the geopolitical power play. You will see that people will have to talk to each other, and this will only come now once the quantities go up. I mean, we will see, just think it through. We will see energy importers of today that become exporters of tomorrow. And we will see exporters of today struggling because their customer base is suddenly asking for a green product. So they have to make a strategic decision whether how long do they keep going on hydrocarbons, and when is the trigger point where I can still do blue, and then where even blue is not good enough anymore. So there's a third one, by the way. There is, I think, a whole third mechanism that has something to do with even, I would say, a democratization of the energy system. I have a couple of discussions running where we believe that even today you could produce competitive green product. In that case, it's ammonia, but for fertilizer. It's not because our green fertilizer would be so cheap. It's because the other product that's imported into the country is so very expensive. So we will have a fight against imported products for sometimes even unfair pricing. We might eliminate all these diesel gensets that are running around on Earth, and this will change a lot of businesses and even relationships between countries. And it will be, now I'm looking a bit maybe 10, 15 years down the road. But the moment the quantities start picking up, we will see a whole wave of different types of corporations to come that today we cannot even imagine.
And I'd like to ask a couple more questions also on what was said earlier. You outlined, of course, solar and wind energy being the drivers behind your hydrogen strategy. What would you see are the current challenges in really, developing this green hydrogen sector?
Ce ne sont pas de contraintes, c'est des opportunités qu'il faudrait, c'est des contraintes qu'il faudrait bien sûr transformer en opportunités. Donc, je pense aujourd'hui que les différentes études qui ont été réalisées sur le déploiement de l'hydrogène, je noterai essentiellement deux points importants. Le premier, c'est tout d'abord de mettre à grande échelle la technologie power de l'hydrogène, d'autant plus que les volumes de molécules vertes nécessaires pour décarboner notre industrie ainsi que nos partenaires européens sont des volumes qui sont très, très énormes. Ceci pose un vrai défi qui est la mise en échelle de la technologie et en particulier pour le volet, bien sûr, électrolyse. Le deuxième, c'est la mise en place de politiques et de programmes clairs au niveau national, au niveau régional, au niveau continental aussi, pour un déploiement de l'hydrogène et créer également cette demande. La mise en place de mécanismes juridiques, fiscaux et d'incitation, je pense, sont aussi des leviers importants qui pourraient booster le développement de cette filière hydrogène.
So how do we bring others on board then? I'm curious because, for instance, Australia was already mentioned earlier, and Australia is still betting on coal as an energy source. And where do you see sort of pressure points is perhaps the wrong word, but motivational factors for other countries to sign up to creating green hydrogen instead of other forms of hydrogen? Maybe a question for the round.
Well, if you look at Australia, the hottest spot on Earth is in Australia, somewhere in Western Australia. It's as big as Spain. And if you take the surface, which is desert, and would fill it with solar energy, you could produce 5 times, 5 times as much electricity as the globe needs per day. Wow. So Australia could feed the world with electricity. You know, it's far away, so electrons will not do the job. So Australia is one of the countries that will become definitely a major producer of renewable hydrogen. The first vessel to transport liquefied hydrogen, which makes it quite dense and easy to transport, has been inaugurated by Japan in order to bring hydrogen, at the moment coal-based, coal gasified hydrogen, to Japan. So Australia just waits for the markets. That's it. So if we have a global agreement on how to treat this new global commodity, if we have a benchmark for the carbon content of every kilo of hydrogen, so obviously renewable hydrogen has a low carbon content, but we will in the future also need, for a transition period, other forms of hydrogen. And if you have a clear benchmark, let me say 1.8 kilo of CO2 per kilo of hydrogen. It's very low at the moment. It's 9 to 10 kilo per kilo of hydrogen. So if it's 1.8, the benchmark, quite ambitious, then you need a robust tracing and tracking system, a guarantee of origin system, and that's what we could develop in Europe, and we are about to do it. That could then help the whole globe to see Europe as the market, or to develop a global market based on that. And we just need to do it. And once we are an attractive destination for this clean hydrogen, you would see a lot of, at the moment, far away countries. Morocco is close to Europe. Chile is far away. Chile will become one of the biggest producers. Australia, South Africa, India has extremely good potential to do so. All these countries will then, of course, start to embark into this new commodity, and Europe just needs to pave the way, and that's what the strategy wants to do.
That's very convincing, and also links up quite nicely to some of the more policy and sort of public awareness points that you were making earlier. I wanted to stay for a moment longer on the topic of international corporations, because I was just chatting with a friend who's based in Kenya the other day about the term load shedding, which is just a nice way of saying we don't have enough power to give everybody electricity. And the, of course, ongoing power supply struggles in many countries on the continent, which had me wondering, how do we really ensure that all countries, so developing countries included, benefit equally from these technological developments rather than just being the supplier of natural resources?
But can I just jump in? This is a very narrow-minded, I don't want to accuse your friend, but this is a broadly discussed, but nevertheless very narrow-minded idea. To say we don't have enough of electricity. We know the figures from the MENA region. So,
oh, I'm sorry. It was just a consumer issue. If you're living in a country where you only have 2 hours of electricity a day and it's switched off, so you're supplying other areas, then it definitely feels like you don't have enough electricity. Sorry to cut you. I just wanted to clarify from what perspective it was being said.
Okay, fully understood. But again, this goes back to the problems that we have to install more renewable capacity. I mentioned the Australian example. Just imagine what many, many countries, and Mr. Kuhn put it perfectly, who are now net importers of energy, will become net exporters. So hydrogen gives these countries also the possibility to become net exporter, let alone the case of Morocco, which is a very prominent one, but there are many, many others. So it is this disruptive systemic change that we have to do. Then we can start to have local production that first of all will lead to a local wealth, because the Moroccan example with ammonia and fertilizers shows that this wealth, this value creation happens first of all domestically. So it brings wealth to Morocco, and that is what needs to be done. Here I have also to say that as Europeans, we should be also looking at exporting, so to say, our good old Anlagenexport, so our technology, and this will happen. But then it enables these geographies all over the globe to become net producers, first of all, of their own energy, and secondly, to become possibly net exporters. We as Europeans, we will be net importers all the time, because our consumption is very, very high, possibly much too high. But that is what I was calling narrow-minded. There was, and there is still, there are still some people who think we Europeans, we don't need to import these things, and we need to do it all domestically. This is not possible. We need to import, and that's where we need Morocco and other neighbors first, and many, many other countries in the world next to do that.
Everybody's nodding there, and I think that's definitely a point that the whole panel will agree on. I just want to pass it over to Mr. Kuhn and stay for one small moment longer on this point. You are also an exporter of Anlagentechnik, so I know that's something that you're already doing in the world. But why do we assume that this is going to be different than with other energy sources? So Nigeria is always the best example for an oil-rich country that has difficulties in supplying its own country with power. Where's the assumption that this is going to be different for developing countries and that they're actually going to be benefiting from the technologies themselves rather than just from the resources that they're exporting?
Yeah, it's I don't see it that easy, honestly, because I have been working on the last couple of, I'm based in Abu Dhabi. I have all countries around me that actually do load shedding, and many of them I visit frequently. So I know what it does to society if in July you switch off the AC in the hottest day of the month. Yeah, and so now there is reasons why in these countries we don't have stable electricity supplies today, no matter what the fuel is, whether it's a conventional fossil fuel or if it's sun or wind. So countries and policymakers, they have to make their homework. And if the dysfunctionalities that were there that prevented it before, they might also prevent it in the future. So that's why what we at Siemens doing, especially here in the Middle East region, with a lot of the countries around us, we are trying to get to really a systemic dialogue that helps them to overcome also a set of oftentimes particular interests that have been there for decades. I mentioned diesel generators already now the second time. Yeah, I really have them on my radar. But there is lots of people who do business and live well with how it is today. So now it has to change, and especially in these countries, we've seen that actually political uprising is triggered by energy supply. You can correlate that. And now I mentioned before that the hydrogen economy, if it comes, it can actually democratize the energy system, yeah, because it will allow many more countries to actually be self-sufficient. Jordan is, for example, is a wonderful example. They have similar to Morocco. They have good wind sites. They have a very good policy system, and they really manage a turnaround. Yeah. So now, and they have no fossil resource whatsoever, yeah, and also no water. So out of nothing, they created a renewable energy sector, out of purely by doing good policy work that really advanced the country. So this has to be done, and the knowledge how this can be done needs to be brought into these countries from their neighboring countries, their friends, where it works nicely, but it can also be brought from Germany. One word on the Anlagenbau, the large industrial side, because I skipped that. The technical solution that we are seeing today when we build large electrolysis facilities, it's by the size of the product and the fact that you will build large industrial installations in order to do that, it automatically creates a quite decent amount of local value add. Yeah. So I believe if we do this right, I mean, it's just the dimensions and the weight of the product you need to move requires us to have local content. And strong partners who help us to implement these projects onshore. So I think that the whole hydrogen economy from this perspective will be actually helping, yeah, by how it is designed, by the technical properties that we are looking at, yeah. How we implement it is another thing. And I would like to just throw in one more aspect. There is also a capital side. So everything that we discussed now is the question how we build it and what environment I put it in and what's the demand. But then there's the question who owns these assets. If I build a lot of these assets in poor countries and the people don't own it, but somebody from somewhere else, I wonder what good does it do. So we also have to look about who owns the assets and how we can help societies to actually keep ownership on their renewable energy sources.
Thank you. I think that's a very important point that you just raised. And I want to pass it back over to Mr. Ouhmed. What are your expectations from your international partners, having also listened to the points that Mr. Kuhn just outlined in terms of creating a fair and level playing field, perhaps also in terms of knowledge and technology transfer? Yeah, do you have certain points where you would say this is what we would expect ideally from our international partners?
Voilà. Donc, en ce qui concerne les principales attentes du Maroc vis-à-vis de nos partenaires internationaux, notamment l'Allemagne, que l'on considère, il faut le dire, comme partenaire stratégique, surtout sur le volet transition énergétique, nos attentes portent tout d'abord sur un volet essentiel qui est l'accompagnement en termes de recherche et développement appliqué, et puis le développement de projets de pilote, de projets de démonstration, de la formation et de renforcement des capacités. Ensuite, je pense qu'il serait intéressant de faire également, d'œuvrer ensemble pour faire un rapprochement entre les opérateurs privés marocains et les opérateurs privés de nos partenaires pour favoriser justement cet échange d'expertise. Enfin, un besoin qui fera converger les deux précédents, c'est surtout, il s'agit d'un accompagnement technique et financier pour mettre à l'échelle et sur toute la chaîne de valeur des projets d'hydrogène vert. Et ces attentes permettront certainement de créer une vraie situation gagnant-gagnant en termes de partenariat sur cette filière.
Thank you, sir. I would like to embark on a closing round for this panel. And for the closing round, I would love for you all, which you've already done in different points in this discussion, just to take a positive view into the future, where we're going to be about 10 years from now. And Mr. Ouhmed, you already outlined in your introductory statement the very powerful vision for Morocco and where you hope this is going to leverage your country and your country's economy. Maybe you can just reiterate what, in the best of cases, will be the impact of hydrogen production, not just on the Moroccan energy system, but also on the Moroccan economy as a whole.
Bon, pour le Maroc, la production de l'hydrogène serait, à partir de son potentiel important en termes d'énergie renouvelable, et particulièrement le solaire et l'éolien, pour lequel déjà on a enregistré des prix qui sont très attractifs. Et de ce fait, la filière hydrogène, il aura pour effet induit, bien sûr, le renforcement des capacités renouvelables qui seront, à travers bien sûr la réalisation de projets qui seront adossés à des unités de production d'hydrogène. Ceci permettrait d'optimiser davantage nos ressources renouvelables, mais aussi de développer un écosystème en matière d'énergie renouvelable. Ceci, bien évidemment, il nécessiterait un renforcement de nos systèmes électriques, du réseau en particulier. Déjà, des efforts ont été engagés dans ce sens, notamment des investissements qui sont programmés pour permettre à notre système électrique l'évacuation de capacités de plus en plus importantes d'énergie renouvelable, mais aussi de moderniser notre système de monitoring ou les dispatching national d'énergie renouvelable. Il va permettre également l'introduction de l'hydrogène, il va permettre de développer une mobilité propre, ce qui va contribuer à la réduction de la part des énergies fossiles dans notre mix électrique.
Thank you very much. And it's going to be an exciting journey to watch. Mr. Chatzimarkis, maybe I can also ask you for a closing comment and a little bit of a view into the future. You already outlined in the beginning the fertilizing sector, the steel industry, petrochemical. Who's going to have benefited the most by 2030?
I think society will benefit most because I mean, you, Geraldine, you know very well the role of the internet, the role of digitalization for our society. I think for the energy, but also for the industrial system and partly also for mobility, hydrogen will play the role that the internet played for the digitalization. There will be a disruptive change. We heard this word today, I think twice already. We are back on track. We can come back on track when it comes to the decarbonization, or should I say the defossilization of our economy. Let me finish with one example. The Danish company Ørsted is today known as the biggest producer of offshore wind generators, turbines. Ørsted was the oil and gas company of Denmark, and they made it to invest continuously more and more into renewable energy. I see Portuguese Gulp to be on that same route. I have seen the prospect of Total, which is a giant going into the same direction. And hydrogen makes this change, this transformation of fossil-based companies into totally renewable-based companies that at the same time are active, do not need to die as a dinosaur, but can continue their life with a new commodity, with hydrogen as a molecule that makes their survival possible. This is what I see. This is what we need to thrive for. And also this is what will help society to stop global warming. It's as simple as that. So that is why I'm very confident that with kicking off these markets very, very soon, with the measures that I described, in 2030, we can already see the 10 million tons of green hydrogen produced by Europe and its neighbors. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Excellent vision. I'm wondering, Mr. Kuhn, do you share it? Will we by 2030 have been able to create a market? How big will it become? And will consumers all be shopping green products with green certified hydrogen energy produced stamps on them?
I believe it's possible. We have seen so much momentum in the last couple of years. If this continues, and if we really address some of the topics that have been mentioned already in the call, I believe it's possible. And I mean, from a technology provider's perspective, how would I know that we did it? I think it would do no harm if by 2030 we have a little bit of a seller's market. Which means I cannot supply every project that comes across. That means there's more demand than supply. That would be a very good sign. That would help bring margins up. I mean, today we have exactly the opposite. We always wonder like what we subsidize where. But in order to sustain also significant R&D spend, at one point of time the technology has to make profits. So if we manage to do this in 10 years from now, that would be, for me, from a technology provider's perspective, an indication that we made it. And on the bigger picture, I think we should see an impact on our CO2 emissions by that time. I mean, we don't do this because we like small molecules more than large ones. We do that because we have an issue to solve, and that's global warming. And if we don't see it in 10 years that whatever we did has an effect, then we really are in trouble.
Absolutely, but it looks like there's hope, which is desperately needed in these times, really. So I want to thank the three of you for this very interesting debate and the insights from your expertise into how we are going to get to implement this green hydrogen industry and future. So again, a big thank you for being the guests in the first of a series of 6 discussions. I very much look forward also to the upcoming discussions, which are going to include topics such as Green Deal and green recovery, integrated energy transition and transport in a post-COVID world. So we're going to stay on hot topics, and I hope you'll join us next time too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.